My name is Nora Caldwell, and I wasn't supposed to be in that room. Not when the will was read. Not when the lawyer closed the folder and looked around the mahogany-paneled office. His face unreadable. Not when the gasp started. But let me start where all this began. Years before the will, the betrayal, and the truth that changed everything. I met Eric when I was 24. He had this easy charm and a smile that made it feel like he already knew your favorite song. We married 2 years later, and by 30, I had traded my nursing shifts at the hospital for motherhood and a beautiful little boy we named Theo. Eric's father, Walter Caldwell, was a man people whispered about. Stern, traditional, sharp as glass, and just as cold if he didn't like you. He was the kind of man who saw the world in binary. Loyalty or betrayal, honor or disgrace, family or not family. But somehow I won him over. Maybe it was the way I cared for his son, or the way I stayed up with him after his heart surgery when no one else could. Maybe it was the quiet way I kept things running when Eric started traveling more and more for work. Eric's mother had died when he was just a teenager. Walter had raised 3 children alone. Eric, his older brother, Greg, and their baby sister, Dana. They tolerated me. But Walter, he trusted me. When Walter's heart condition worsened, it was me he asked for. Not Greg. Not Dana. Not even Eric. Me. I moved into the Caldwell estate with Theo, taking care of Walter full-time. It was supposed to be temporary. Eric said he'd visit on weekends. That lasted exactly 1 month. By the 3rd month, he'd stopped coming altogether. By the 6th, I saw the photos. Eric was in Cabo, smiling, arm wrapped around a woman half my size and none of my age. Her name was Kenzie, and her Instagram page had no shame. When I confronted him, his only response was, "Don't make this messy, Nora. My family's going through enough." His family, like Theo and I, weren't part of that anymore. Could have left. Maybe I should have. But Walter, he wasn't just a father-in-law. He had become something more. A father figure, a mentor, a man whose company meant more to me than Eric's empty apologies ever did. And there was Theo, just 5 years old, bright, sensitive. He needed stability. He needed Walter too. So I stayed. Walter died on a Thursday. It was quiet, peaceful. I held his hand, and Theo slept beside him in the armchair, clutching the wooden train Walter had carved for him the month before. No one from the family was there when it happened. Not Eric. Not Greg. Not Dana. Only me and Theo. 2 days later, I received a short text from Greg. "Family will reading is this Sunday. Private. Only blood relatives invited. Thanks for all you did. No, I'm sorry." No mention of Walter's final days. No invitation. I read the message 3 times before setting the phone down. And for the first time in years I cried. Not because of the insult. Not because of the exclusion. 'Cause it was over. And they had erased us like we were a footnote in their story. The house felt strange after Walter passed. Too quiet. Too still. I busied myself packing Theo's things and sorting through Walter's medical records, hoping distraction would numb the sting. That's when I found it. It was late. Theo was asleep, and I was boxing up Walter's books when a dusty Bible slid from the shelf, landing with a soft thud. The pages fell open to the Gospel of Luke. But tucked inside wasn't a bookmark or old photograph. It was an envelope, plain, unmarked. Inside was a folded document, yellowing but official, notarized. And it was Walter's handwriting across the top. Addendum to last will and testament, executed 6 months prior. My breath caught. The document was short, less than a page. But what it said made my knees go weak. Walter had added a codicil to his will, one that left his personal estate, including the Caldwell family home and several shares in the Caldwell Steel Company. To me. Not Eric. Not Greg. Not Dana. And the reason was scrawled in shaky cursive at the bottom. Because Nora, and only Nora, stood by me when the rest were too busy, too proud, or too blind. It was signed, dated, witnessed, and stamped, I sat on the floor for a long time, staring at it, numb. Not because I felt triumphant, but because I had no idea what to do next. The reading happened at the Caldwell law firm, in a polished office filled with polished lies. I wasn't invited, but I showed up anyway. Greg glared at me when I entered. Dana didn't even look up from her phone. Eric, now with his arm around a heavily pregnant Kenzie, had the audacity to smile. "Nora," he said, voice dripping in sarcasm, "didn't get the memo." "I'm here for Theo," I said evenly. "He deserves to hear what his grandfather left him." Then laughter from Dana. "He left a plastic train, maybe." The lawyer, a stoic man named Mr. Jenkins, cleared his throat. "We will begin." The first portion was expected. Stocks divided. Cars. Properties. Vacation home. All to the children. Nothing to Theo. Nothing to me. There is an addendum," Jenkins said slowly, pulling a yellowed document from a separate file. A shift in the room. Greg sat forward. Eric blinked. "This codicil was submitted last night," Jenkins continued. "Hand-delivered by Ms. Caldwell." Dana scoffed. "You mean Nora Caldwell?" Jenkins didn't blink. "The codicil meets all legal standards. It is binding." Then he read it aloud. And the room changed. The house, the steel shares, the personal family assets, all left to me. For my unwavering loyalty. For raising Theo. For being the only one Walter could count on. The silence was deafening. Kenzie stopped smiling. Dana looked like she'd swallowed glass. And Eric looked pale. Like a man whose safety net had just been yanked from under him. They tried to challenge it. Course they did. Greg hired a private investigator. Dana posted cryptic rants on social media about gold diggers. Eric showed up at my doorstep at midnight, drunk and teary-eyed, begging to start over. But the document held. The notary had passed away, but the witness, a retired nurse who had also cared for Walter, was alive. And furious that they were trying to dishonor his final wishes. I didn't need revenge. I had the truth. I had my son. And for the first time in years I had peace. But the story doesn't end here. Because what I found next, in the back of Walter's desk drawer, made everything before it feel like just a prologue. And it would change Theo's future forever. 2 days after the will reading, I was still waking up feeling like I'd stolen something. Not because I felt guilty, God no. But because the weight of what Walter had left me, the shift it caused in the Caldwell family, felt seismic. Like I'd triggered an earthquake by simply not walking away. But I wasn't celebrating. I was cleaning out his study. It smelled like cedar and old coffee, exactly like him. The shelves were lined with books he actually read, not just ones you keep for show. His reading glasses still rested on the armrest of the chair by the window. I hadn't moved them. Couldn't. Theo was coloring quietly by the fireplace when I pulled open the bottom drawer of Walter's desk and found a thin wooden box. No lock, no label. Inside was a set of papers, some old photos, faded letters, and a smaller sealed envelope marked in Walter's unmistakable handwriting. For Nora. After. My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside was a letter. Handwritten. Deliberate. Nora. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and the storm is probably already raging. They'll say you manipulated me. That I was confused. That I was sick. They'll throw every stone they can find. Don't let them break you. You stood by me. Not once out of obligation. Always out of love. You saw it. Every single day. You never asked for anything. You never needed to. But there's something I've never told you. Something about Eric. And about Theo. You'll find the documents in the locked cabinet behind the mirror. Use the silver key. You'll understand why I left you what I did. Why it had to be you. And only you. W. My breath caught. The locked cabinet. I'd seen it before. Behind the mirror in the hallway closet. I'd assumed it was just old files, company documents. Walter had told me once, vaguely, that it was just paperwork. I hadn't thought of it again. Till now. The silver key was taped underneath the box lid. I waited until Theo was asleep that night. The mirror came off easily. The cabinet behind it had a tarnished lock that clicked open with a soft sigh. Inside were 4 neatly labeled folders. Caldwell Steele, Eric, Greg, Trust, Theo. I stared at the last one for a long time. The first 3 were brutal in their own way. Documents, records, emails, evidence of years of embezzlement, tax avoidance, and company manipulation. Eric had been siphoning company funds into offshore accounts through dummy consulting contracts. Greg had signed off on at least half of them. Dana. She wasn't directly involved, but she had benefited. Big time. Walter had known. And he had been building a case. Not for court, but for me. The last folder, Trust, though, was different. It had no spreadsheets, just a single DNA report, and 2 birth certificates. The first was Theo's. The second was another boy's. Same last name, but the father listed. Not Eric Caldwell. It was Walter Caldwell. I read the report again and again. I didn't understand until I did, and my legs nearly gave out beneath me. Theo was not Eric's son. He was Walter's. I couldn't sleep. I sat by the fireplace, staring at the flickering shadows, clutching the DNA report like it might disappear if I blinked. Didn't make sense. And yet it did. Walter had insisted on being there for Theo's birth. He took him for walks every morning. He built him things with his own hands. And there were moments, so many, that I thought were just grandfatherly affection. But now I saw them differently. The urgency, the protectiveness. Eric and I had separated for nearly 6 months before Theo was conceived. We hadn't told anyone. We'd reunited for Walter's sake, to keep up appearances. But during that time, Walter and I had become close. Too close. Well, I shut my eyes. I couldn't. Well, I needed answers. Real ones. I went back to the box. Under the letter was a flash drive. I plugged it into Walter's old desktop in the study. Contained a video file. The screen flickered and there he was. Walter. Sitting in the very armchair I'd left his glasses on. Looking older but alert. Nora. If you're watching this, then I didn't get to explain this in person. Sorry. I wanted to. But I knew you might walk away if I told you. Theo is my son. I never forced you. I never hurt you. But I loved you. Quietly. Respectfully. And when you came to me that night, when you said you felt invisible, broken, like no one saw you anymore, not even my own son, I should have stopped you. I should have said no. But I didn't. And when you got pregnant, you assumed it was Eric's. So did everyone. I let you believe it. Because I didn't want to ruin what you still had. But when I saw how Eric treated you, when he left, when he humiliated you publicly, I knew I had to act. The trust in Theo's name is real. It's protected. And no one can touch it. The company shares I gave you are yours to manage for his future. You were the best mother I've ever seen. The only one who ever showed up. You deserve to build something with it. For him. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope you understand why I did what I did. And why I loved you. The video ended. I stared at the screen long after it went black. So many emotions flooded through me: rage, grief, shame, confusion, love, and then a whisper of clarity. This was no longer about Eric, or Dana, or Greg, or even Walter. This was about Theo, my son. My son who carried the blood of a man who had failed in so many ways, but who had also protected us when no one else would. I made a decision that night. I wasn't going to run. I was going to fight. For Theo's legacy, for his future, and for the truth. News of the codicil hit the press. Greg and Dana, in their arrogance, leaked it themselves, trying to build public sympathy, claiming I had manipulated an elderly man in decline. They had no idea about the DNA evidence. Not yet. They tried to paint me as a homewrecker, as a thief, as someone who had preyed on an old man for money. But what they didn't know was that I had documentation. Timelines, emails, medical notes from Walter's doctors confirming his clarity in the months before his death. And the recording. It was enough to not only shut down their challenge, it was enough to shut them down. But I didn't go public with it. Not yet. Because the final blow was still coming. And I wanted them all in the same room when it dropped. 2 weeks later I sent the invitations. Private meeting. Estate business. I made sure they all came. Eric, Greg, Dana, even Kenzie. I waited until they were all seated in the drawing room of the Caldwell estate. The very room they used to claim I'd never belong in. Then I pressed play. Walter's video filled the screen. Not the part about our shared past. Just the message to Theo. About the trust. The ownership. The truth. They sat frozen. Greg went red. Dana looked physically ill. Eric didn't even blink. He just stared at the screen like it was someone else's life. When the video ended, I spoke. There's a trust in Theo's name, I said. It's irrevocable. Walter made sure of that. You're bluffing, Dana hissed. He wouldn't. I pulled out the documents. The DNA test. The trust paperwork. It's all here. Greg slammed his fist on the table. You think you've won, he snapped. You think this makes you family. Understood. No, I don't think it makes me family. I looked at Theo standing quietly at the doorway, watching with wide eyes. I know it makes me his mother. And that's the only family that matters now. But even that wasn't the end. Because in Walter's final notebook, tucked beneath the trust documents, was a list. A list of every employee Greg and Eric had laid off while padding their accounts. Every vendor they'd refused to pay. Every backdoor deal they'd made at the expense of the workers. And at the bottom of the list, a note. If Nora chooses to, she may pursue justice. I give her my blessing. The last battle was about to begin. But I wouldn't be fighting it alone. There's something that happens when you finally stop surviving and start choosing. It's quiet at first. Like the moment before a storm breaks. After that night, after the video, after the evidence, after I told them the truth about Theo, I expected chaos. And I got it. Dana called me a liar. Greg threatened to expose everything. Eric didn't say a word. He just stared at me with that strange, distant look. Like he was watching a house burn and couldn't decide whether to mourn it or let it go. But I didn't flinch. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. And Walter hadn't just left me a legacy. He'd left me a trail. A roadmap for justice. I started with the notebook. Walter had written everything down. Timelines, names, accounts, transaction details. The man had been meticulous. A steel magnate to the end. I brought it to his old friend, Mr. Samuels, an attorney who had handled the estate's corporate affairs for decades. Samuels read the entire thing without saying a word. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and said, "We need to bring in a forensic auditor. And I'm going to need some very good coffee." The investigation took months. I kept it quiet, even from Theo. He was adjusting, slowly, beautifully, to life in the house again. His old bedroom, once packed in boxes, had become a sanctuary. I didn't tell him about the storm building outside our gates. I just made his lunches, helped with his math, read him bedtime stories. It was the most peace we'd had in years. But behind the scenes, the auditors confirmed everything. Eric and Greg had siphoned over $4 million from Caldwell Steel over a 6-year period. They'd used shell companies, fake marketing contracts, even paid themselves bonuses through non-existent board votes. And Dana, while she hadn't signed off, she'd been accepting gifts from one of the vendors tied to the embezzlement. Trip, jewelry, a lease on a car registered under her assistant's name. It was enough. I could have taken the evidence straight to the police. But I wanted something else first. I wanted them to feel it. So I called a board meeting. The boardroom at Caldwell Steel hadn't changed in decades. Dark walnut table, leather chairs, a wall of framed photos of every CEO that had come before. Walter's portrait had already been taken down, but it wasn't gone. I had it restored and quietly rehung before the meeting. When Eric and Greg walked in, still clinging to their titles, they froze at the sight. I didn't sit. I stood at the head of the table, files stacked neatly in front of me, Samuel seated to my left, 2 auditors to my right. "What is this?" Greg asked. "A review," I said, "of your performance. And your compensation." Eric laughed. "You don't have that kind of authority." I opened the file. Walter's final shareholder transfer documents. "Actually," I said, "I do." When I laid the evidence on the table, printouts, receipts, ledgers, no one spoke for a full minute. Samuels broke the silence. "Effective immediately. You're both suspended pending formal charges. The board will vote on your removal by close of business." Greg started shouting. Eric's hands shook. But they knew. It was over. Dana didn't show. She'd already booked a flight to Dubai the night before. Cowardice in heels. The news went public the next day. The media had a field day. Steel dynasty implodes amid scandal. CEO brothers ousted by late founder's chosen heir. Caldwell widow at center of family firestorm. They loved the drama. They didn't know half the truth. But I didn't care. Because the employees of Caldwell Steel, many of whom had been laid off, furloughed, or treated like afterthoughts for years, began reaching out. Emails. Handwritten letters. One man stopped me outside the grocery store just to say, "Thank you for fighting." I invited them back. The laid-off engineers. The plant workers. The retired receptionist Walter still sent birthday cards to. We held an open hiring day. And the company began to breathe again. It wasn't just mine. It was Theo's. It was Walter's. It was ours. Eric tried to reach out. Once by email. Once by a letter I didn't open. Kenzie left him. Surprise. I heard through Samuels that Eric had taken a job consulting for some offshore company in Malta. Dana disappeared from the spotlight completely. Rumor had it she was trying to pitch a reality show, but nobody was buying. Greg fought the longest. He tried every legal route he could think of. But when the judge read the forensic report in court, he didn't even finish the session. "Motion denied," he said. "You're lucky this isn't criminal yet." I never smiled bigger in my life. On the 1-year anniversary of Walter's passing, Theo and I went to the old vineyard behind the house. Walter used to walk there every Sunday morning. He said it was the only place where his mind went quiet. We brought a blanket, a small picnic, and one of the model trains Walter had carved for Theo. Theo was taller now, brighter. He'd just placed first in his science fair. Built a working windmill out of soda cans and fishing wire. As the wind rustled through the grapevines, he looked up at me and said, "Do you think Grandpa Walter would be proud of me?" I looked at him for a long moment. And then I said, "I think he already was." He smiled wide and full. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote something for school," he said shyly. "It's a story. About a hero." Opened it. And I read, "My hero is my mom. Because she didn't give up. Even when everyone said she should. She taught me what real strength looks like. She makes pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs. She builds things when they're broken. She always knows the answer. She saved a company. She saved me. And that's why she's my hero." I didn't cry. Not right away. But when he leaned his head against my shoulder, I did. Because for all the storms, the scandals, the betrayals, that moment, that quiet afternoon in the vineyard with my son, it was everything. Walter Caldwell built a steel empire. But his legacy wasn't what he left in stock options or square footage. It was the promise he made with one handwritten note. The promise he kept. The one I carried forward. And I intend to keep it every single day. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story and tell us where you're watching from.